So in this video, I'm going to be talking to you about how to use debt to get rich. And yes, you heard it right. Most people use debt to become poor and get consumed by that debt. And some people, the rich, they use it to get richer and richer. And debt is an extremely important tool for a lot of the rich people. And a lot of the people use debt. Warren Buffett, Larry Fink, Grant Cardone, if you like him, Robert Kiyosaki, Donald Trump. So there are many billionaires that have used debt in their favor. There is a guy called Sam Zell, which is a big guy, used to be a big guy in real estate. He passed away now. I think his net worth is about between 9 and 12 billion dollars. So, why is it that certain people, when they use debt, they get more and more poor and they get consumed by it, and certain other people are just not scared of it and they raise large amounts of money and they get richer and richer? And this is something that I wondered about. Like I would be scared of maybe borrowing $20,000 or $50,000 back in the day, but these guys are raising hundreds of millions of dollars and with a smile on their face. So something did not make sense in their psychology, or they seemed reckless to me, or they understood something that I didn't. And the difference between the people who get poorer using debt and the people who get richer, like President Trump and various other people that I mentioned, is how they use their debt and what do they buy using that debt. So we're going to look at the principles of debt, the purpose of debt, and we're going to analyze debt as an instrument, and the negative uses and the positive uses, and how you can flip that dynamic and how you can use it in your advantage to get richer and wealthier and do good things. So that's what we're going to talk about. And we're also going to talk about the risks, the pitfalls, and how you can avoid those. So, debt is a financial instrument to get access to the capital that you don't have. In a way, you're borrowing from your future self. So the principle in business is that you have to produce more than what you consume. So you have to produce more than what you consume. If you consume or spend $10 million in personal expenses, then you better have generated at least $100 million of value in the marketplace for you to be able to spend that money. If you borrow that amount and you haven't produced $100 million or created substantial value and produced goods and services far exceeding the amount of what you consume, then you're going to be in trouble. You're going to get swallowed up. So debt, a lot of the people use to buy things, from a personal expense. I mean, they are spending money that they don't have, and they're borrowing from their future self, and essentially they may be choking their future self. So they're consuming faster than what they produce. And you can use debt to get into those situations. If you buy things that don't produce cash flow, things that don't produce goods and services. So that's an important factor. You have to keep in mind, you have to produce more than what you consume. And if debt is used to help you in the production, then it's fine, assuming that production brings a return. So if you use debt for that purpose, then you're getting richer and richer, because you are bringing things which are not in your access, not in your reach, into your reach, valuable things. Or you could use debt to consume instead of produce. So that's really the first mindset. You want to be a producer. You don't want to be a consumer. Producer of what? Producer of goods and services that people value. Okay. So you have to use debt in that direction, in a specific format, in a specific context. Only then it produces richness. So that's the thing to remember, is debt is an instrument of business. It's not designed for you to consume more things that you can afford. If you're borrowing because you don't have the money to consume things, then you have to look at your production rate first before you start borrowing money. So, and which is what the banks would look at. The banks, before they give you the money, they look at your cash flow statement, because cash flows are an indication that you're producing goods and services and trading in the marketplace, meaning you're adding to the marketplace, and money is just a measure of that. So when a banker gives you a loan, they're going to check your cash flow statement. Is this person producing more than they consume? They're not going to give you money if you're not producing more. So the cash flow is just a measure, the profits that you make is just a measure of the goods and services that you've added to the marketplace. So you get rewarded to add value to the marketplace. So that's an important principle to remember. So debt has to be used to produce cash flow. It can't be used for something that doesn't produce cash flow. Examples of this would be a car. You know, if you're somebody where the car is not as useful and it's not going to give you a promotion or increase your cash flow, don't get into debt to buy it. Again, if you're producing more than you consume, then maybe it makes sense, make the call, but you have to really look at what you're using the debt for, because it's risky. Another thing that people spend money on is buying a house. Well, how much cash flow is the house going to produce? You have to have a way to use the house to produce cash flow. If you rent it out, then yes, it's going to produce cash flow. Otherwise, it's not going to produce cash flow. So if you have a car and a house and it's financed by a bank, then you've choked yourself, because you've allocated debt into an avenue that doesn't put money in your pocket. Now, if you're a social media influencer and branding is very important, for example, Andrew Tate, a big part of his brand is the supercars and the hypercars, right? So in his case, he's used the cars as an asset, so he's flipped the whole dynamic. So it depends who you are. Something can be a liability or an asset based on who you are and how you use it. Another example of this could be President Trump with his big plane. Trump was going really big in branding, and his whole appeal was based on that, and hence he needed a plane for that appeal. So that's a different kind of purchase. So that's the real principle here. You have to be able to produce more than you consume, and you have to assess who you are, and you have to allocate the debt where you're going to get the cash flow, where you're going to get a substantial return in exchange for the debt you raise and the debt you allocate. So you have to be careful with this instrument. So how do you get rich? Now we understood the debt. Now we're going to look at the rich part. Most people look at and this is something I also saw, is that how much cash you have in the bank. That's what the measure of being rich is. But where does the money come from? The money comes from people. And why do they give the money to you? Because you have something, you have a product or a service that they value. Or why do they spend money on a business? Because businesses have products and services that they value. So if you look at and you observe the movement of money, money is almost always going to businesses. And businesses are also known as assets. An asset is something that produces goods and services for the people, and in exchange collects cash. That's the definition of the asset. Something that produces value and in exchange for cash. How do you define value? Well, people have to value it. That's how you define value. Nothing has an intrinsic value. Something has a value in relation to somebody. So you may say, oh, I'm producing goods and services, valuable goods and services. And if you have zero sales, well, then the market doesn't value those goods and services. Maybe you're marketing in the wrong market. But the principle here is that the people have to value the goods and services. So if you have a business that's producing goods and services, or if you know an asset that's producing goods and services that people value, then the business should have cash. And how you measure if they're successful or not successful is by looking at their financial statements. So that's where the money comes from. It comes from the people, and it's almost always exchanged in exchange for goods and services. So in short, you have to, and within the asset, where does the money go to? Does it go to the employees? Small percentage of it, yes. But who is the money going to? Okay, money flows into the asset by people in exchange for goods and services. This is the asset. It's not a person, it's an asset. It has employees, it has staff, senior executives, board members, shareholders. Where is the money going? Most of it. It's going to the owner. That's where all the money, most of the money is going. After all the expenses are paid, most of the money goes into the pocket of the owner. So it's that position that we are after. It's the position, we are after assets that are producing cash flow, and we are after a specific position, which is the ownership position. That's where most of the money is going. And where do people mostly look to secure their position? In employment. Most people want to be employees. Most people want to take a position in a company where the money is not flowing. Money flows into an asset, and from the asset it flows to positions. If you have to analyze like a chessboard on all the positions in a company and where the money is going, you have to pinpoint it. It's going to be going towards the shareholders if the company is good. And the shareholder is also known as owners. So that's the key here. You want a position, ownership position in a company, in an asset. The best use of debt is going to be to acquire this position. One of the excuses or reasons that I find a lot of the people have is, oh, well, I don't have money to buy this company, or I don't have money to do this, But you can get money. If you have the right opportunity, you can get money. You can raise money from the marketplace. The bank may not give you the money, but the bank may give this asset the money. So you can raise capital on the name of this asset, and you can structure it on this asset. Now you need lawyers, accountants to help you to do this in a legal manner and compliant manner. So make sure you get your lawyers and accountants. But you can use debt to acquire ownership in these companies. And why would you want to do that? Because the asset is producing cash flow, and the bank is going to look at the cash flow, and they're going to see that they're going to get their money back with interest, and you can secure an ownership position, and you can run this business for a few years, and you can pay the loan off. Now, another question is, why would anybody sell you their business, their profitable business? Well, the answer is they won't. You're right, exactly. They would not sell you unless they're leaving the planet, meaning they're getting old and they cannot physically continue to run this profitable business, and their children don't want anything to do with that business. So what's going to happen to this profitable asset after they're gone? It's going to dissipate, and the customers are going to go chasing the goods and services in some other business. So their life's work, the position that they have cultivated, is going to dissipate if the owner dies. So he has to pass it on to somebody who can run this, who knows how to run this, and who have an interest in running it. Their children may have an interest in the owner's house because it doesn't need any management, or owner's gold because it doesn't need any management, but it doesn't want to necessarily acquire their business. And why? How can I say that? You tell me what your parents used to do, and would you do what they do? And the answer is no. And you say, I want to do my own thing. I don't want to do what my parents did. Well, that's how most children think. They don't want to do what their parents did. So, but would you want, your parents' house? Probably, because it doesn't need any management. So that's the principle here. When it comes to succession planning, when it comes to acquiring this asset, the reason the children don't want this asset is because they don't want to manage it. All their time is going to go to managing it. They don't understand it. They never took interest in it. and it happens in a lot of the families, small businesses particularly with 10 employees, 12 employees, they're not going to be interested. Yes, now if it's a fashion brand like Gucci, multi-billion-dollar company, then yes, the children are going to be interested in that because it's a lot of power. But a small million, $2 million, $3 million business, children are not that interested. So the owner is getting old, and the rule of nature is the young replaces the old. So the owner is getting old, and the business is profitable, and it's producing valuable goods and services. You can measure that in the cash flow, and you want to acquire this position. Why would the owner sell this to you for free? He won't. So hence, debt comes into play. And you can structure the debt on a company by company basis. So that's another thing that I didn't understand, is that what the rich do is they don't raise money in their own name. They raise the money on the asset that they are buying. A classic example of this would be a real estate loan. A real estate loan is backed by the real estate that you're buying. So it's backed by what you're buying. Another thing could be a car loan in some cases, when you buy the car and the car itself is the collateral. Well, the same thing happens when you buy a business or an asset, a cash flow producing asset. That asset itself is the collateral for the bank. And in a lot of the cases, you can get away if you structure it properly without putting your own assets on the line. So it's just the business that's backing the loan because it has good cash flow. The bank feels safe. You structure the deal properly, and you can acquire the business. And if you acquire enough businesses using debt and enough ownership positions in these assets, then we looked at this, money flows into the asset, and from the asset it goes into the ownership position. So you're consolidating or bringing together many ownership positions into one, and we call this a holding company. Okay, and you're using debt to do this. The best way for me to explain this would be that you're acquiring kingdoms. You have many small kingdoms, and businesses are modern day kingdoms. There are many small kingdoms that have a throne, that have the throne of the king. And what you're doing is going, and these kings are getting old, they're doing well, but they're getting old, and they want somebody to take over, and their sons are not interested. So a new king, a prince like yourself, or a princess if you're a woman watching, walks in, and you start consolidating the thrones one after the other. And instead of going to war, typically kingdoms are acquired through war, you use debt. You use debt. You find somebody who can finance the deal, and you start consolidating these positions. And that's the game of mergers and acquisitions. If you've been watching my channel, obviously you know this, but I wanted to make it a little bit simple. And this is the proper way of using debt. You're chasing cash flow, and you're acquiring positions where the money is flowing. And money flows when goods and services that people value are traded. That's where the money is flowing, and it flows to a specific point in the company, which is the ownership position. And you can acquire this from an older owner who is at the stage of retirement. And that's how you get rich, using debt. Not by buying a car, because that doesn't put money in your pocket, and then you have to work a job to pay off this loan. But when you acquire a company, it already has a framework in place. You have many employees, and the cash flows are generated by many people. But when you buy a car on your name, then you're the one who's running around generating this cash flow, and there is no system in place. But a business is more systematic, it's more automated. Not to say that you wouldn't have to do work. You would have to do the work to make sure it runs well, but you have support of many people to run it. So it's a very different kind of debt. So as you can see, the nature of debt keeps changing based on what you buy. So whether you get consumed by the debt or you get rich by the debt depends on how you use the debt. And debt is almost always should be used to acquire positions of power where the cash flows are going, so that you can utilize the cash flow to pay off the debt. And that's the principle here. Now, there are a couple of disclaimers. When you go to acquire a company, you need to analyze their financial statement. You need to know how to value the company. You need to structure the deal right. And you need experienced accountant, corporate finance experts, lawyers, industry expert that can analyze the deal. So it's extremely important. You're using somebody else's money, the banks, and you're very careful with it. There are laws, there are regulations, and you have to comply with them. So you want to be honest. The banker can lie to you, and nothing's going to happen to him. And the seller can lie to you, nothing's going to happen to him. But you cannot lie to the banker, and you cannot lie to the seller. You cannot modify, manipulate, or twist the information that you're presenting to the banker. You have to keep everything transparent and honest when you're dealing with debt, and in general in business. But especially with dealing with debt, you have to disclose everything about what you know, and you have to disclose it accurately as it is, objective truth. You have to present it, and the banker has to take a decision on that basis. So and to do that, you need to know the variables. You need to know what the business is doing, and how you know that is by analyzing financial information, operational information, and legality of the business. And you need advisors for that. You need advisors that have had experience in doing this. So you need to evaluate this ownership position very carefully, and your eyes are not enough. You need your advisors to do it. So if you're interested in learning this business model, learning this game of acquisitions, of using banks, of building advisors, reach out to me. I have a mentorship program which is currently structured around 24 months, and I'll help you get in that position where you have the advisors, you have the lawyers, you have the accountants, you have the industry expert, and how you can get in contact with banks, and how you can get in contact with these small kingdoms or small businesses, and how you can find the main guy who's making the money and negotiate and structure a deal and start acquiring many ownership positions in your region. If you're interested in that, reach out to me via email. I'm going to leave the link below, and I'll talk to you soon.